Welcome to video number 4 in our fractions unit. Now that we have discussed adding and subtracting fractions, it's time to move on to multiplication and division. In my opinion, multiplication is probably the easiest operation with fractions because you do not need to make any changes to the denominators. You simply line up the two fractions, multiply across for both the numerator and denominator. The only tricky part comes during simplifying the answer. Let's look at an example. Take a moment to pause the video and see if you can multiply these two fractions on your own. We start by lining up these fractions, 7/8 times 2/5. Then you simply multiply across. 7 times 2 is 14, 8 times 5 is 40. Now we have an answer, but we're not quite done yet. We have to simplify the answer by finding the greatest common factor like we did in video 2. So let's go through the factors of 14 and 40. Factors of 14 would be 1 and 14, or 2 and 7. Factors of 40 would be 1 and 40, 2 and 20, 4 and 10, or 5 and 8. Now I like to put them in order just to make it a little bit easier to see. So for 14 we have 1, 2, 7, and 14. For 40 we have 1, 2, 4, 5, 8, 10, 20, and 40. So now we can see that the greatest common factor is 2 for both of these. And we'll divide both the numerator and the denominator by 2 up here. We'll end up with 7 over 20. So this is our simplified answer. Remember that it's always best practice to leave your answer in its most simplified form. Next we move on to division. For these problems, you also don't need to worry about changing the denominators, but they begin a little bit differently. You first invert the second fraction to turn it into a multiplication problem. Now why do we prefer to turn it into a multiplication problem? Well, this is actually much easier than trying to divide across, especially if you are working with small numbers. Once we convert the problem to a multiplication one, it's really easy to just multiply across like we did before and simplify if necessary. So let's try an example together. Take a moment to pause the video and see if you can divide these two fractions on your own. So to divide 7/8 by 2/5, we start by inverting the second fraction to turn this into 7/8 times 5/2. Then you can multiply across like we did in our other example. You get 35 over 16. Now in this case we have a numerator that ended up larger than the denominator. It also doesn't appear to have any way to be reduced because the greatest common factor is 1. It's possible to turn it into a mixed number, but recall that in epidemiology it's not likely that you'll encounter a fraction like this because you're working with scenarios in which the numerator will be lower than the denominator because it's a portion of the whole. For example, if you're working with population data, you'll see something like 5 out of 20 students got the flu. So in this case, 5 would be your portion, while 20 would be the whole. You can say 5 out of 20 students got the flu. So all of these stats are just fractions. So in this video, we learned how to multiply and divide fractions. We no longer needed to worry about a common denominator, and we discovered how to make division problems easier by inverting one of the fractions. Please continue to video 5, where we will discuss more ways to express numbers. Thank you.